October 23, 1942. A German reconnaissance plane slides low over the Libyan sand, Zeiss glass focusing on what the pilot expects to see. Columns of British lorries, supply dumps, the familiar geometry of an army on the move. At 8:47, his report notes roughly 600 transport vehicles in the southern sector, exactly where Montgomery wants him to look. The picture seems to confirm German intelligence. The British are building up logistics in the south. What the camera cannot read from 500 meters up are the thousands of fighting vehicles that lie just beyond the frame. Tanks, self-propelled guns, armored brigades massed under layers of hessian netting, chicken wire frames, and sand-encrusted canvas. From the air, they look like ordinary 3-ton lorries. The deception works. When the bombardment opens at 21:40 that night, the Afrika Korps finds its reserves facing the wrong sector. Men and guns are poured into a phantom threat, while the real punch, the armored assault, comes from a direction the Germans have been trained to ignore. This wasn't fancy electronics or secret paint. It was chicken wire and grit smeared with oil, paste, and sand. It was soldiers who learned to cover a £1 million Churchill tank with a frame bought from an Egyptian market, to plaster it with local sand and engine oil until it read as desert rubble in the lens. German engineers, by contrast, shipped in factory-made camouflage nets designed in Munich, printed with mathematically calculated desert patterns and tested in laboratories. On paper, the German system was superior. In the field, it failed. The British improvisation succeeded. That paradox, the victory of ad hoc, locally tailored craft over industrial precision, would become the decisive lesson of the desert deception. The secret wasn't neatness or artistry. It was understanding what the desert actually does to objects and what aerial reconnaissance actually sees when it looks down. Before the war, doctrine favored standardization. The Germans had refined a theory of camouflage through Spain and Poland. Factory-made tarpaulins, printed netting, materials matched to theater with scientific care. British manuals echoed the same logic. Approved patterns, uniform application, quality control. The idea was elegant. Make every vehicle look the same way, and the enemy can be reliably fooled. But the desert is not a laboratory. The North African sky changes by the hour. Sand color shifts from cream to red to gray across a few dozen miles. Light at dawn, midday glare, and long evening shadows alter shapes and textures. A perfect uniform net becomes conspicuous when it lays as a consistent sheet against a wildly varied earth. It is the very regularity that betrays it. The British answer grew from necessity and theater-specific thinking. Small camouflage units were formed at divisional level, often a handful of men, many recruited from film studios, theater set shops, or art schools. They were taught a single principle: match the terrain, not the pattern book. Their toolset was rudimentary: chicken wire, hexagonal mesh, wooden battens, hessian, used oil, water, and local sand. But the way they combined those materials was ingenious. A typical procedure: build a simple frame over a tank with chicken wire, stretch hessian or canvas over it to change the silhouette, then smear the whole thing with a paste of sand and oil. The paste did something a factory net never could. It created real texture. It aged like the desert itself, dark when damp, pale when dry, flaking and recoating in irregular patterns as wind and sun took their toll. From the air, that randomness read as rock scrub and ruin, not an enemy fighting vehicle, and because the paste was made from local sand, the color matched the immediate location exactly where it mattered. Sun shields, simple cheap frames costing a few pounds and hours to construct, could turn a 25-foot tank into the outline of an innocuous lorry. Dummy tanks of wood and canvas, placed deliberately in the wrong sector and left to weather, drew attention away from the real formations. The whole system was designed for the mess and chaos of the desert, not the control of a testing ground. Operation Bertram, the deception for the Second Battle of El Alamein, was the largest single application of these principles. In the weeks leading to the offensive, the British executed a deliberate choreography of real movements and fakery. The North was prepared to hold the fist of the attack. The South was turned into a convincing illusion of supply and slow traffic. Sun shields and sand paste-coated frames hid hundreds of tanks in plain sight. In the south, dummy armored concentrations, wooden frames with canvas covers, cheap and obvious, advertised the wrong axis of assault. Between the 1st and 10th of October, the 1st and 10th Armored Divisions moved nearly 500 vehicles into their forward assembly areas in the north. Each vehicle drove silently by night, parked, and was covered by a team who worked until dawn. By morning, a tank might be completely transformed into the camera's eye, the turret smoothed into a roofline, the barrel disguised, the whole mass reduced to a dull, unthreatening shape. German reconnaissance flew dozens of sorties over the lines during this period. Photographs consistently reported a large concentration of supply lorries in the south, and only a modest, disorganized presence in the north, the opposite of reality. When the northern barrage opened and the armor punched through, many German commanders believed they were facing only a holding action, not the main effort. For hours their reserves were misallocated, redeploying slowly to meet a threat that did not exist. As captured German intelligence officers later admitted, that delay was decisive. The logistics were strikingly cheap. A sun shield could be built for a few hours and a handful of pounds. The paste used to blend frames into the desert was made from available materials: sand, oil, sometimes flour or glue when available, scavenged, mixed, and applied by soldiers, rather than shipped from depots. The British turned scarcity into an advantage. Materials that would normally be considered inferior became the very property that sold authenticity to an enemy camera. The real triumph of the desert deception was philosophical. German doctrine trusted professional systems and repeatable standards, engineering for control. The British moved in the opposite direction, engineering for chaos. Which approach would work better when sandstorms shred canvas, when daylight alters tone, when reconnaissance has minutes to decide and hundreds of photographs to process? Factory-made nets failed in part because they degraded uniformly. After weeks of exposure, printed patterns faded evenly, and the net's regularity, once its virtue, became a signal, artificial. The British method embraced irregular degradation. Wind ate the paste unevenly. Sun and dust produced natural mottling. A sun shield flaked, recoated, accumulated grime, and that messy, inconsistent appearance read as an ordinary, uninteresting object from the air. There was another, deeper advantage: decentralization. British camouflage innovation spread horizontally through the ranks, a tank crew teaching a neighboring regiment, a desert workshop producing pre-formed frames for sale to units, an enterprising quartermaster bartering for rolls of wire in local markets. German logistics, centralized and formal, were slower to adapt. The Brits learned, iterated, copied, and improved in the theater itself. Operation Bertram's success, the misdirection that helped win El Alamein, was not a fluke of luck. It was the deliberate application of theater-specific knowledge, low-tech materials, and an understanding of human perception under pressure. A German photo interpreter, trained to spot regularity and catalogue mechanical signatures, did what every human mind does. It looked for patterns, it reached for the familiar. The British taught the desert to look familiar in all the wrong ways. In the end, the lesson is simple. Systems designed to be perfect under pristine conditions are brittle when the world is not pristine. Systems designed to be messy, adaptable, and locally matched survive. In North Africa, the chicken wire and sand paste beat the printed net. The improvised sun shield, the wooden dummy, the patched frame, cheap, ugly, inconsistent, created the one thing the Germans feared: doubt. And in wartime, doubt can be as lethal as a shell.